Hello and welcome to MudderRucker Season 4. We have an absolute gift for you here today. First ever MudderRucker and Interpro show collab. I'm Ailbhe O'Nolan.
And I'm Cian O'Mallor.
And with us to discuss things, all thing Interpros, is host of the Interpro show and journalist, Caolán Scully. Welcome, Caolán.
Thanks very much for having me. It's moments like these where you realise just how busy everything gets all of a sudden. Because I got the athletics to one side, I'm talking rugby with you, and you just realise, oh yeah, the chaos is nice.
Keeps you ticking anyway, I'd say.
It does. Now, we are recording just after Sarah Healy's 5,000 metre final, which I'm sure plenty of our listeners will know about. But so if I do feel a bit forlorn or sound a bit forlorn, you know why.
Yeah, absolutely. On that topic, actually, you're a podcast host of multiple podcasts, but a sports journalist with the focus on rugby and golf, but a kind of a broad range. As part of your college education, you wrote a thesis on women's sports coverage, I believe, and you've extensively covered both the women's and men's game of rugby and beyond. What drives your passion for the women's game of rugby?
I must say now that's the most research anyone has ever done to me. So done into me. So thank you. or Keen, whoever, I'm not gonna do it.
No, I take all the credit.
That was absolutely all the credit goes down there.
But I know it's for me, I guess, as someone said to me before, the best way to learn it, you're either sport is sport or your sport is men's and women's sport. And to me it's just sport is sport, and I'm probably, I wouldn't say I've always been the ally to women's sports or anything like that. Like I would have went through years where I wouldn't have watched a whole pile of different things, soccer, rugby, camogie, whatever it might be. But I suppose when you get older and it's your own friends playing and it's all that as well. I know it is corny and it can sound bad, but it is kind of what it takes sometimes. It's it's like, oh geez, I need to watch this. And you're like, oh yeah, why don't I watch this? And I think that's how it came. And as you mentioned there, like my thesis was tracking the evolution of women's sports coverage in Ireland over the last 15 years to give it its proper title. And I think when you look back, then you do actually kind of realize, like, actually, I've watched a lot of these things. The only one I did miss, I was disappointed, was the relay gold that time, which I think famously wasn't on RTE because there was a URC match and I was at said URC match. So that was probably the only one that I didn't see. So it was a little bit of a, okay, I'm not doing too badly here. But when it comes to like the Interpros now, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had the press conference with Munster's Maeve earlier on today, and I've interviewed Maeve in the past, and you really just do get a lot more personality, don't you? And that's what it boils down to as well, because come the end of the men's rugby season, you're exhausted. Come the start of the women's rugby season, yes, it's a lot shorter, but it's like, oh, I could literally ask them anything and I'll get a straight answer. Well, maybe not a straight answer, but you get an answer, a good one. And I do think that's something that has kept me growing into it more and more as well, because the more of these press conferences and one-to-ones that I do, and you'll know that I spoke to Tina Maloney-McDonald after the Scotland game, for example, it just feels more the way it should feel, the way sports should feel, and I could go on about that for 2 hours when it comes to rugby, but we won't, because poor Keane only has a certain amount of time to edit this. I really do think it boils down to
with the scissors.
I really do think it just boils down to the connection. And to me, sport is connection. And as I said to someone the other day, I simply cannot watch any match as a neutral. It's not in my DNA.
No.
And I think that's probably a part of it as well. And, I've covered games where I was neutral, and I'll let you decide whether I was or not. But that's a different question as well.
It's interesting you talk about the personality within women's sport. It's something I've spoken about for years, that a lot of male sports figures are within the sport for a long time. They're within professional setups for a long time. And it feels like by the time we're seeing them on our screens, they're media trained and almost sanitized. And to a certain degree, maybe, okay, they do need to be sanitized or they do need to be coached. We see the likes of, in the past, people getting in trouble, Mac Hansen getting in trouble for things he'd said on camera. We just don't seem to see that in the women's game. We just see this kind of humility and honesty in their answers. You're asking them, how did you feel you performed? And they give you a blow by blow. I think we did well here. I think we have to work on this there. You're asking them about, their history or something interesting about their career, and they're only more than happy to tell you about it. And you do get that bit more personality. I certainly feel in women's sport in general. I'm sure it'll get to a point eventually where it becomes that little bit more sanitized, but the kind of time we're in, women's sport is having its moment finally. It's becoming so popular so quickly across such a broad range of sports that, I think we're living in a treasure trove of personality, and we need to tap into it as much as possible because it sells the sport. So speaking of selling sports, the Interpros is something that has come around again. It's something with kind of a long history. It's something that's moved around the annual calendar for a long time now, Caolán. Some people within the sport have been calling for a broader purpose for the Interpros. And some think that, it has lacked a purpose. It has lacked a very significant purpose within the pathway over the years. Caolán, do you think that this year it's perfectly positioned because we're building towards the WXV global competition towards the end of September? It's almost like the perfect timing to showcase women's rugby in Ireland and to see who stands out.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And if you're Scott Beamond, you must be thinking, this is great. I've got a full, clear my 4 Saturdays, watch all these games. I'm not sure how many he's going to attend. I assume he's going to be at the finals day. But just clear your calendar, watch all this, because this is important. And I think calendar placement is important too, because, you look at PWR this year, they don't start till November, which is a long time into the year. And if this was for us, we'd be talking about, the big tagline in Ireland is always conceding ground to other sports. That's always the one we seem to go with, whether it's GA, soccer, rugby, no matter what it is. And I think if women's rugby had gone down the similar route in terms of the interprovincials and had put it in November, I don't think it would be able to get the same attraction, to be quite honest, because November internationals are on, then you're into Champions Cup or Challenge Cup rugby, depending on your province. And it's going to be a hard sell. It's harder to get pitches. It's harder to get people at the gates. There's county finals. Whereas now feels like a great time. And as you said, it leads into WXV. It'll help with selection decisions as well. You would hope. We haven't exactly seen the perfect streamlining effect of provincials or club into national team, and we'd like to see that improve. But I think it does put it in a good light. And even if, I don't know how many people were at the games this weekend, I assume the Dexcom will get a decent enough crowd for the finals. You would imagine it'll just start to build and build and build. And the more internationals that are involved, I know Connacht had less of theirs, as most of theirs were coming back from injury. The more of them that are involved will help grow it as well, because ultimately, who are the stars? It is your Eve Higgins, your Anna McGanns, your Aaron Kings. An underrated one from having been at the Dexcom was Katrina Finn, and how often people were asking for her name, which I was surprised. Fabulous rugby player, unbelievable rugby player. We'll get on to that later, but I think it's because of the YouTube and the TikTok stuff that she is she has her own audience as well. So that will help, and I think that will help when we get to, especially the fact that there's a home game in Tala this year, which is a new step, which is something that has not really been done. When was the last time a rugby international was played outside of a traditional rugby area? Do you know what I mean? You have to go back quite a while for the last time. So I think even for that, the fact that we have these games before that one is important as well. And yeah, it's in a very good place. And I think, look, if we're going to be rude and analyze things, and it is analysis that I mean this, some players will be delighted that they have these 4 games, because I thought an awful lot of the more senior players were the ones who looked the most rusty at the weekend. Maybe not Anna McGann. I thought she was absolutely excellent, for example. But a couple did, and we'll probably get into that in a bit.
Yeah, and Cian Caolán touched there on some of the big international names that are involved in the provincial squads this year. The likes of Erin King, Grace Moore, who's currently clubless after leaving Trailfinders, Cian Maloney McDonald, Fiona Chute across these squads. It's great to see that kind of mix and the potential
it's nice that it's happening now. It's a shame it hadn't happened before now, but of course, there are good reasons for that. Well, reasons anyway. I mean, the central contracts obviously is one prong of that. It's 35 central contracts now, I think, currently. But those players are contracted and programmed centrally. So it's Celtic Challenge, Wolfhounds Clovers, Six Nations, WXV, and they're not necessarily as kind of given credence to provincial games. So they're not always released for the Interpros, which is a shame up until now. The other side of it, of course, is that so many players now are based in England in the PWR, and that causes its own issues in terms of you're not going to get players released from their contracts there most of the time for Irish domestic competition like this. So it has been quite AIL player based up until this point. But it is brilliant to see, and it was great. We know we heard rumblings about this happening a couple of months back, and it was very exciting, and it's great to see it come through and to see these international players getting their first caps for their provinces, which is
bizarre.
it's astounding. It's weird. Eve Higgins, 32 caps, and it's her first Leinster cap.
Yeah, Erin King, the Irish captain.
The Irish captain. Not captaining Leinster as well, which I thought was actually, it was a brave decision, and I can see why he did it, but I really like it. We'll get into some of the nitty gritty of how it worked out later on, but and then poor Grace Moore in between contracts at the moment, unfortunately, but this gives her an opportunity to put herself in the shop window for the WXV upcoming, which is fantastic. And as Caolán mentioned, a lot of the senior players looking a bit rusty. So this is a great opportunity to tune in some of those skills back up again ahead of what is going to be a fairly fiercely contested WXV.
Caolán, we've seen a bit of movement of players between squads as well that would have traditionally played with the provinces over the last few years. Like Savannah Durkin, who was Ulster, moved to Blackrock, played for Leinster last year, and now she's gone back to Ulster. Katie Corrigan as well is now the Red of Munster. Do you think there's an element of the IRFU putting a plan in place to match up certain players? Do you think there's an element of trying to balance squads? Or is this simply players that are looking for game time wherever they can get it?
I think there's a little bit of everything about it, depending on the players' contracts. Like for the likes of Grace Moore, for example, to start there, she was with the Wolfhounds at the start of the year in Celtic Challenge. So you would have thought she'd have gone to Leinster or Ulster and actually could have done well at Ulster. But then you've got Claire Bowles there, you got Fiona Shute O'Sullivan, and she's officially listed as now. Congratulations to herself, Eric. So maybe that would have made sense. But then at the same time, Munster had lost friend of the pot, Chloe Pearse. They'd lost Dervla as well. Jane Clossley was an injury doubt, and she went down there and shone. And I think, Katie Corrigan, similar at Munster, did very well. And I am in favour of it. I don't think, long term, it's not going to be something that we're just going to be able to go, if there's Irish provinces in the PWR, we'll just grab this person here for a week. You can't, you can't. Or 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it is. But I think movement around provinces is always healthy. It's a conversation that's been done to death in the men's game. I'm delighted that it has come to the women's game so we can do it to death again. But I'm completely in favour of it. And look, like at the end of the day, we're only going to be producing more and more players from here. It's not going to retract. It's not going, we're going to produce more and more. Like one thing that really stood out to me, because I kind of covered the tournament last year, is there was an awful lot of new faces there. When you include internationals, admittedly, there was an awful lot of new faces there. There was fresh faces. There was positional changes as well, which we might get onto in a couple of instances. And like you look at the players who are standing up from, and Katie Corrigan is one of them, coming up from the under-21 Six Nations and how well they did, and they took to it seamlessly. So if players do get moved around over the next 2 to 3 years to get game time, like we've already seen with Celtic Challenge, you have to remember Ruth Campbell, his prime example there. She was playing with the Clovers. If they get moved around to, help to fit in and to maybe play in a different style or to play alongside a more experienced player, great, like absolutely great. I'm all for it, to be honest. I'm in favour of movement of players. The only thing is, naturally, as long as it doesn't affect their, anyone who might have jobs or whatever, as long as they're not the ones that are affected. But look, I think it's worked so far, and if you're Munster, for example, you're the big beneficiary of week one because Grace Moore was close to, if not one of the best back rowers of the weekend, and Katie Corrigan scored a brilliant try and did very, very well in her matchup. And even on the flip side, just to finish on it, like, are we worse off for not having PWR players back? Yes, and I think prime example is Leinster. I think they really could have done having Evo Dowd out there. Thought their scrum really, really struggled, and I know I'm deputising for Chloe, and I've just gone straight in and going, Eilish Cahill was class. She was class, in fairness.
Yeah,
It's Eilish Cahill.
Yeah.
It is. But like Leinster could have done with Evo Dowd. And in years gone by, we did see, Dorothy Wall, Daniel McMahon, players like that release. Maybe we will again in future. I'm not sure why this time, especially when there's such a big break till PWR starts. But look, it is what it is. Even say if Brittany Hogan plays for Ulster, do they win? Possibly. Like, she is kind of worth 5 points, in a game. So it's more where we're at than anything else. I wouldn't be too critical, and I'd be more positive on it right now. And maybe that is my own lens, because I've spoken to a lot of people who are AIL focused and things like that as well, where it's like, oh yeah, you go where the rugby is. It's a different thinking.
So we'll move into the Munster Leinster game then, which is the first game there of the weekend. Caolán, you're wearing a red shirt, nice and neutral, as you described.
Very convenient, but it was
very subtle. Very subtle.
It's great washing out, lads. Like, that's all it is.
So Munster led from very early on, and Leinster just spent much of the game just chasing it. It really felt to me like Munster were this cohesive side who all knew the structure, well used to playing with each other. Leinster felt like they were just about the sum of their parts. Perhaps they need better structure to buy into that structure in future.
Yeah. Thank you for coming to me, of course, as the biggest Munster fan on this podcast, so I can opine on how amazing they are now for a couple of minutes. But in fairness, they were great. They were really, really good. It's really hard to get past. They won last year 100%, won 50-15 in the final against Leinster in that as well. And that was without released internationals. Amazing continuity of performance. And, hats off to that. And, kind of not hard to look at where that might come from. Looking at the 23 there, 12 of 23 players are UL Bows from the Munster 23 on the weekend. And the squad draws from just 6 clubs in total. Compare that with Leinster, it's 23 from 9 different clubs. And 6 debuts. I know some of those were international debuts, but there was a couple of young faces in there as well. So what you did see from the Leinster side of things was they were missing cohesion. You saw that then in the rucks, the lineouts, the scrum. They were all under pressure the entire game. There was no connectivity. They weren't able to string together multiple phases of play within single passages, and that really cost them. But what Munster were able to do was draw on that familiarity that they have. They're playing with each other week in, week out. More than half the team in the same club, and that pays dividends. If you know the person who's inside you, who's outside you, you're more likely to be able to gel with them, even in altered structures. You learn the defensive patterns, you learn the attack patterns, you learn the calls. But when it comes down to it, it's knowing the players beside you that'll pay you the best, rather than kind of knowing any playbook inside out. And I think Maeve, she just absolutely ran away with it as captain. I think it really is. What was it? Matt Brown framed it. She's the gel that holds it all together, and I think that's pretty fair. But I think there is more to it than that, and I think that that kind of connectivity that comes through playing together is really hard to overlook.
Yeah, Caolán, I think you've met Maeve and known her for a few years, and I've met her, and she's probably one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, first of all. But in terms of the rugby she plays and the leadership she offers, particularly after, this is her second season back after a very lengthy injury. She comes back in. She looks like she's never been out. Last year, captains the side last year to win, and this year she's leading again. She just leads through how she plays, what she does. She's always on the front foot. She's always searching for opportunity, and she's always bringing people with her. It's not a kind of a May Thane attitude. Um, is she the perfect leader for Munster in the wake of our friend Chloe Pearse retiring?
I think she is. I think she encapsulates Munster. And funnily enough, that this is completely unprompted. I was having this conversation with a mate of mine the other day, and I said, we kind of started by talking about Craig Casey and, if he was to get the Munster captaincy very soon. And I said, if that happens, you do have the two perfect embodiments of Munster Rugby as captain. And I know that's dealing in hypotheticals, but that is off the assertion that Maeve is. And like when you speak to her, and again, it is so funny. She is the nicest human I've ever met. I am actually quite good friends with someone who went to school with her, who's probably the second nicest human you'll ever meet. So it must be something down there in the Ballina Killaloe direction. But she, like, her tenacity, her leadership, and like we spoke to her last year, myself and Patricia spoke to her last year, and she did say she didn't know if she'd get back to that stage where she'd be able to pull off 4 games and a bounce. Interpros are quite difficult. Obviously, she went off for a few minutes before half time. And like to have that sense of worry, but like she said herself, she's back, she's enjoying her rugby again. And what more could you want than to be enjoying it? And look, just before we move off on Maeve, because I could genuinely talk about her for hours as well. You have something that Keane talked about there about how streamlined Munster look. In the press conference earlier on today, Maeve spoke about how they wanted to be so physically dominant collisions wise. And I'm so sure that's something Chloe could talk about again, and she's big on collision dominance the whole time, so I'm not surprised. But it's not just that. It is, look at how many places Matt Brown has been involved in. Look at how many places Niamh Briggs has been involved in. Like, it's not just the fact that it is UL Bohs. And again, I'm really sticking on the Chloe Pearse role defending UL Bohs now. Well, and it's not the intention, but it's more the fact that their coaches have been steeped in the women's game for so long now. Niamh Briggs has been involved for 7-8 years. Matt Brown has been involved for the guts or 6 or 7 years as well. And I think that's where it's coming from. And I think what you're actually seeing now is very much a Matt Brown, Niamh Briggs, definitely Chloe, considering what she said on this podcast many times, she definitely has had a hand in how they play. And it's all coming together, and it does look very slick. And I think the prime example, again, to use the under-21s, thought Sally Kelly was excellent. Thought Lucia Lynn was excellent as well. And look, obviously we could talk about the front row as well. And I do think the scrum was the turning point in that game, especially in that first half. But I do think some of it comes from just that absolute clarity, because for years they've been playing this similar brand of rugby. Maeve Hogue said it. It is kind of a Munster brand, if you want to put it that way. I do agree with her there. But I suppose that's not all either. It's not just because it's Munster. It's because they have been training this way for quite some time, and it is very, very slick. And Leinster, on the flip side, they're in their, third coach in 4 years or third coach in 3 years. They didn't look slick, ultimately. And you could boil it down to that. I'm trying not to use the C word because it's very overused in rugby. But Leinster did not look half as slick. And as I said before, I thought their internationals were very quiet by their standards. And maybe that is the flip side of the fact that Eve Higgins has not played for Leinster. Aaron King has not played for Leinster before. Maybe that's what that is. Like, it's hard to gauge. No one was saying it last week, but maybe that is part of why they just never looked like winning this game, if we're quite honest.
Yeah, I think, you've touched on there, you're looking at so many internationals. You're looking at the Irish midfield between Aoife Dalton and Eve Higgins, the Irish 10 in Dana O'Brien, the Irish captain in the back row. You're looking at a huge number of the Irish squad you think would be very well gelled, and you'd build a team around them, but it just didn't seem to come off at all. They've potentially got a lot to fix within a week. Next week they're playing against Connacht. Connacht will come to it in a while, but Connacht looked dangerous at the weekend. And do you think there's a potential that there's a threat there, or do you think Leinster are going to rebound well?
Leinster should win, shouldn't they? Like, I'm not I'm not going
Yeah.
to knock them down and then build them up and then knock them down or whatever. Like, that's not my
Mm.
intention. They should win. I think 1 to 15 talent wise. I think especially tied 5 is where it'll probably swing. But at the same time, Connacht looked very assured in what they wanted to do as well. If we're going to say that about Munster, I thought Connacht as well didn't always work out, but Faith in the second row was absolutely brilliant. Maeve Dealey was player of the match. She was brilliant in moving back to 10 as well. And they still have, Ailbhe and Riley only played 40 minutes. She's got more minutes to get in. Dave and Parsons, Clean Maloney McDonald, Dave McMahon. If they are all available next week, I'd give them more than an outside shot, to be honest.
Yeah, you'd have to. Just quickly finishing up with Munster and Leinster. Munster have a lot of depth in a number of positions, and we already touched on that 10 role, but we saw Enya Breen starting at 10, who has been in or around the 10 position. She's traditionally a 12, but has been a kind of a playmaking, kicking 12 who can play 10, got her shot and did particularly well with that shot. And then Katrina Finn coming in later. You feel the Kate Flannery, who has been the Munster 10 for a number of years, and the Bows 10 missing out, perhaps a little harsh on her. But, looking at the skill set between Enya Breen and Katrina Finn, there's huge depth in the out half position.
Definitely. I thought Finn was excellent when she came on. I don't think Enya Breen played very well by her standards. I thought she did grow into it. To be fair to her, I thought she grew into it. She had some very nice touches before Beth Buttimer's second try, I think it was. Her second
of countless tries.
Yeah. And look, Beth Buttimer may listen to this, and if she does, I mean this is a compliment. I did say to a friend of mine, the best thing about Beth Buttimer is she's always 10 seconds away from the yellow card in how she plays. That is a compliment. Anyone who knows rugby knows that.
How many players like Peter O'Mahony, etc., have spoken about how you live on the edge, and that makes you a better player. And I think she's the epitome of that in the women's game. We don't see that very often in the women's game, do we?
No, you don't. And to be fair, and I'm not trying to, again, I don't want to seem too harsh on Leinster. I almost forgot the name of the province for a second. On Leinster, I kind of wanted to see more of that from them. From Ruth Campbell, from Erin King, when the game was slipping away, I kind of wanted to see them just bring just that little bit more. And I thought Erin carried very well. But you could see that her scrummaging from number 8 maybe wasn't what Maeve was bringing from number 8, for example. And especially when there was so much pressure coming on that tight head side, you could tell which connections in the Leinster scrum weren't quite working. Second row were struggling to get a handle on it. Back row were struggling to get a handle on it. I know once it gets back there, you're
yeah. If your second row are struggling, your back row is not going to solve it.
Yeah, they are. And that's part of it as well. Don't get me wrong, but I thought there was just little chinks in the armor like that the whole way through from Leinster, and you were looking, and ultimately, as you said, Ailbhe, I was looking at Dana, Eve, and Aoife to bring something, to show something, to come up with that moment. Now, granted, I thought Sally Kelly, Grace Moore, defensive hitters, excellent. Got up off the line, got in their face. But at the same time, are Sally Kelly and Grace Moore starters for the Red Roses? Are they starting for France? No, they're not. Maybe in time they'll be that level player. Sally Kelly, I thought was excellent, as I said. But I was expecting more from Leinster, and I think that may have been, for being critical, I think it may have been air of what can happen to Ireland sometimes, where they're just not getting the parity at up front that they want, and it just goes from there. And then, funnily enough, arguably Leinster's best outside back was Robin O'Connor. And sometimes we have seen from Ireland that it is someone in that back three that just gets a little bit more freedom and just shows that bit of a spark. And actually, over in Claremont, it was Robin O'Connor as well. So maybe it's a her thing, to be fair to her now. It is a her thing. But I was expecting more from Leinster, and I didn't get it. The scrum was poor. I know it was okay. Sarah Delaney actually played well on the whole. But just expected an awful lot more from them and didn't really get it. Whereas Munster, thought Siobhan McCarthy had a very underrated game. Obviously, her and Cahill were excellent. Thought Jane Clossie was incredible, actually.
Yeah, she was
brilliant. Hit everything that moved. And that's one thing, because I've actually watched most of Jane Clossie's games for Munster because she's only a couple of years in the frame. She always does that. She always hits everything that moves.
Yeah.
I think someone said it. I think it was. I actually won't give the name because it was in the press conference today. She would probably have been involved for Ireland in the Six Nations if it wasn't for injury. She was having a good Celtic challenge as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just the disparity. And once you go 1 to 15, and won't name the person, but I did get a message being like, take off your glasses. Should have been a full Munster 15 on your team of the week. But there are elements where you're like, okay, fair enough, because Munster were the better team and they were playing what we believed to be the second best team. But to go back to what you said earlier, maybe Leinster get turned over this week and everything we think we know gets turned upside down on its head. And if there's anyone that can lead a team to win, you are looking at the likes of Maeve and you're like the likes of Cliona. If they're available, we don't know yet. We'll know in 2 days' time. But you are looking at the likes of them and thinking, maybe, just maybe,
Blood in the water.
Exactly.
Could well be.
Yeah.
It could well be, yeah. And, looking into the games next weekend, with Munster playing Ulster, home game for Munster again, which could be very, very tough for Ulster. You'd expect to see them ring a few changes. Emily Lane started last week. I'd love to see Abby Salter-Townsend start this week. Katrina Finn maybe in a 10. So it would be good to see some changes. But we'll quickly have a...
because Katrina Finn mentioned it in her YouTube video, which is very young lad goes on a podcast and mentions YouTube. It's very coded. But she did mention she was on a return to play. Essentially, she was capped at 40 minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if that goes up to 50 or 60 this week. And she starts because of it and then comes off early, to be honest. Because I thought she was excellent. I thought she did not look out of place at all, to be honest with you. So
I'd agree.
That should be interesting.
I think she's the future Irish 10. I'm going to put it out there. That's quite a big... Yeah, it's quite a big thing to say, but I absolutely do. I think she is very close to where Dana is without having had much game time at all at that level. Under 20s, winning an AIL title, sure, that's loads of experience at lower levels. But I think we need to see more of her in this competition. We need to see her at least come on off the bench in the WXV Global to really build her into that role. I know Dana's held that role for a long time, but there's no harm in that competition and then pushing each other. Nicole Fowley really didn't push Dana. It was Dana's show with Nicole Fowley kind of, playing second fiddle for years. I'd love to see somebody push Dana and Dana push back and see that improve. But looking at Ulster and Connacht at the weekend, not as interesting a game by any means. Ulster at home, scoreline 10-15, just 5 points in at the end. Cian, Ulster have long been the wooden spoon holders of this competition. They won it twice, many, many years ago in the early days. But since then, they haven't done much of anything. They've had a very long spell where they haven't won a game. They drew with Connacht 2 years ago and came close in recent years with both Munster and Leinster, but failed to get the win. Despite those improvements year to year, are they still chasing that competition?
Yeah, honestly, I think Connacht's look more of a chance than Ulster this year. Sorry to say, Connacht are exciting looking. Craig Anthony hasn't playing genuinely ambitious ball and hand rugby, which is great to see, and I think it suits the Connacht brand well. I think it suits the players well. Maeve Deely to out half seems to be working an absolute charm. I mean, I wasn't that done before now. Player of the match. Can't argue with that. The handling errors are something they're going to have to iron out. But that's not the hardest thing in the world to fix. If that's all that's wrong with your game, and that's not all that's wrong with the game, but if it's the most noticeable thing, the big fix, that's the one you focus on. You can do it a lot in a week. Ulster now, though, the youngest squad they fielded in years, and they have some genuinely creative talent there, like Thompson and Crow. But out half, playmaker, they've just not got it that I could see. You can get close with good players kind of across most of the pitch, if you don't have a playmaker, you're not going to win matches, and I think that's really what's letting them down. So maybe some of that internal transfer, maybe some of the depth there and out half for Munster, some of the outrageously rich depth from Munster, maybe should go up north to Ulster.
Listen, we lost one Flannery to Ulster. We're not losing another one.
I was going to say it would be the one that makes the most amount of sense right now, because in fairness, Kate Flannery is a very nice rugby player. She has got a lot more experience than other contenders, considering how much Interpros and AIL minutes she has. Now, the one thing I will say about Ulster, yes, was a young team. I do still think they showed the value of having Claire Bowles still involved. I thought she was excellent in this game. Fiona Chute and Slide McGrath both came off early. I assume they were kind of coming back to fitness. I assume that's just going to be the case. That's just going to be the way it's going to be. But yeah, I do agree. But then again, like, ultimately, these things take a while, and the stark reality of it all, and I don't mean this to be at all rude, but like Connacht, they've got a lot of players who are playing with Blackrock, Railway, UL Bohs, Galwegians. Ulster don't have that. They have been unfortunate, and I know it does start from there. And yes, in a few years they will produce more, Claire Bowleses and Sive McGraths. I thought Sophie Barrett actually was very good in this game as well. She scrummages brilliantly. She's going to be in the Ireland squad in the autumn, you would imagine, as well. But it does take time, and I think it'll be a while before Ulster are knocking the door down. I do think Connacht are closer right now. Like, when you look at their under 21 representation, like Shea Verheshen was out half on that team for a bit, or back about half. She moved to 12. As you said, Maeve Dealey went to 10. Maeve has played an awful lot of 10 growing up at underage. She's always been a brilliant kicker of the ball. Went to school at Maeve. Maeve kicked me in the head before by accident as well, playing Gaelic football.
Accident.
It was, actually, to be fair. Sure. It's Gaelic football. You go down to try and win the ball, but I bent over too far. It was my own fault. But she was excellent. And like that cross kick to Anna McGann was on the money. But then again, how many wingers finish that? Anna McGann does. She's not a national one prize in Belfast as well, it should be said. Like, she scored 2 worldies against Canada last time she was up there. But yeah, no, going back to Ulster, like, it is disappointing. But if they keep producing 1 to 2 players every 2 to 3 years, which is the kind of track that they're on at the moment, I think they're still going to be in a healthy position. I think if any problems doesn't go to PWR, as much as Ulster makes the most sense, I don't think it's going to be them ultimately. I don't think that's the decision to make. But again, that's way above my pay grade as well. But it's getting there. It is getting there. But I think it starts at AIL level ultimately.
So looking back at round 1, standout players. I know last year standout players for me were absolutely Siobhan Sheeran at Ulster. A bit quieter this round 1, but a player with a lot of she backs herself in contact all the time. She's somebody who finds space. Who for you, Caolán, was a standout player from round 1?
Well, I have 50 of them if you wanted, to be honest.
I was going to say, I just got the Munster team sheet up here for you now.
One step ahead.
Who are the surprises, the unexpecteds?
I'd say Siobhan McCarthy, to be honest. I know she's internationally capped, but she has kind of been out of sight, out of mind. She was going up against Linda Jugang, and I thought she got the better of Linda Jugang for large passages in that game. Siobhan did come off relatively early in around the hour mark, but I thought she was on top. I would mainly focus on the younger players who I thought stepped up, and I include Robin O'Connor in that in Leinster, although she's had a brilliant Six Nations. Claire Bowles, again, another one, older, kind of unheralded. She's always been brilliant. She's like, I thought she did an excellent World Cup, for example, when she was called upon. I thought Maeve was excellent as well, but you see Elaine did very well. Shea Verheshen did very well. The Connacht front 5 in general did all right, to be fair, and it was a young front 5 there. And yeah, that's who I'd be looking at. So Sandy Kelly was very, very good as well. But then at the same time, should we be surprised? Like, I had this conversation maybe with yourselves, definitely with others, that like, you put out a legitimate Ireland A team in the Six Nations, they don't finish bottom. Like if you're having the likes of Maeve, Jane Clossie, Claire Bowles, players like that involved, Katrina Finn, that does not finish bottom. So we actually shouldn't be too surprised. But if I had to say someone, because I always give love to props, thought Eilish Cahill was incredible. And it wasn't just her scrummaging, her carrying, her maul work was incredible as well. Like every little bit about it. And I think, look, we talk about the RFU and selection policy and all that. If you are Scott Beamond, you're looking at that and going, geez, I could start to phase out Linda Dugang's reliance in terms of playing 70 minutes every week and look at Eilish and see what she can bring.
And I think Dugang had quite a quiet game, including a card as well. We have a bit of an unwritten rule on the podcast here now. Usually it's when Chloe's around, but like you said, you're deputising for her. We'll mention Eilish Cahill. We have to mention Eilish Cahill. And she's somebody with a really kind of a positive attitude towards her play. Lovely, lovely person until you're being hit by her, and then you absolutely hate her, I'd say. She's a powerful, powerful woman. For me, you already mentioned Sally Kelly, very much had a good game. Chiz Maguire, she's just an absolute live wire. She gets her hand on the ball and you don't know what she's going to do with it, where she's going to go. Maybe her own players aren't too sure either, but she always pulls off something. She always makes some meters quite well. I thought, some of the younger ones for Leinster probably didn't stand out as much as you might have wanted them to. I think Cleve Malloy had a decent enough game. I think Maggie Boylan had a decent enough game, but we've seen better from Maggie Boylan, and I think she's one definitely to watch in the future. Alma Atagaman, who came on in the second half, I thought she did quite well as well. I would love to see a little bit more of Ellie O'Sullivan-Sexton. And I know, again, Dana is the starting number 10, but I'd love to see O'Sullivan-Sexton push her that little bit. Then looking at Ulster, again, Siobhan Sheeran, I think she's just my favourite, and I see her every time she's on the pitch now. She's phenomenal. Sophie Barrett, like you mentioned, Caolán, had definitely a decent game. And then Connacht, like you said, there's a lot of very young players there, but all of them played very well. The real error with Connacht for me seemed to be those handling errors, and they're probably the easiest thing to fix in a squad. So it'll be interesting to see, what squads they put out for next week. Like we said, Munster facing Ulster. You'd imagine that Munster would look to some of their depth to build some other players into the squad and give them an opportunity. Leinster versus Connacht, I think that's going to be the game of the weekend. Absolutely. So we're going to wrap it up. Caolán, thank you for bringing the Interpro show to MudderRucker. Where can the listeners catch you on social media?
Instagram, Caolán Scully Media, some dots and underscores in there somewhere. Look, you'll find me.
We'll stick it in the show notes.
You stick it in the show notes. One of Ailbhe's videos has me tagged, so that's probably the best way of getting it. Twitter as well for anyone who still uses it. And yeah, to be fair, I can't give a name just yet, but I will be on the Red Army podcast this week, and we're going to be interviewing 2 Munster players. Not going to say who. Let people guess for themselves. Both have been mentioned, but to be fair, all of the Munster players have been mentioned tonight. He's sliding back in his chair. But yeah, no. So we'll be doing that. So to keep the stories going, I'm sure I'll be following along every step of the Interpros as long as work doesn't pull me away, which it will at some certain stage, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure the sports don't really matter. What's golf? So anyway,
Athletics is where it's at this week, to be fair.
So that was round 1 of the 2026 Interpros. It served up no real shocks. Round 2 potentially could pose a little bit of drama when Leinster take on Connacht at 2:30 p.m. Ulster travel to play the reigning champions Munster in Cork at 4:30 p.m. All of those games are being showed on the TG Carry YouTube channels this coming Saturday. Big shout out to TG Carry. Absolutely invaluable when it comes to women's sport and women's rugby in general. Otherwise, we will not be seeing these games. So it's an absolute credit to them that they year on year are backing women's sport. So next week we'll be back looking at the games coming up this weekend, talking you through all of the action. But until then, keep on rucking.